Settle in and let your body relax, because nothing in this story needs your attention in a hurry. This is a slow walk, not a race, and the only thing you are expected to do is listen and imagine, gently and without effort. Picture the modern world slipping away in the most boring way possible. The lights do not suddenly shut off, they simply stop mattering. The sounds of engines, screens, and notifications grow distant, like a memory you are no longer interested in holding on to. Even time itself feels less strict, less sharp around the edges. Now imagine yourself standing still as evening settles in. You are near a small medieval village just as daylight is giving up for the day. The sky is dull and pale, stretched thin like old cloth, slowly darkening without drama. No one stops to admire it. Sunsets are not special here. They are just a signal that the day's work is over and the night is about to begin. The ground beneath your feet is uneven and firm in some places, soft in others. There is no path meant to guide you comfortably. You walk carefully, not because you are afraid, but because the ground has no interest in helping you stay upright. Stones press through the dirt, and the earth feels cool, already holding on to the night. The village itself feels close and tight. The houses are packed together, as if warmth might spread better that way, though it rarely does. The buildings are made from wood, mud, and whatever else could be found nearby. Nothing is straight, nothing matches, everything looks slightly tired. Doors are low and walls are thin. These homes are not built to impress anyone. They are built to exist, and even that feels like a long-term challenge. Roofs sag gently, not enough to collapse, just enough to remind everyone that repairs are always temporary. As you move forward, you notice how quiet things are becoming. Not silent, but muted. Voices are low and short. People do not linger outside. Evening here is not for wandering or chatting, it is for retreating. A few small fires glow faintly inside homes, barely bright enough to light a corner of a room. The light spills out through gaps in the walls and doorways, thin and weak, then disappears as people move inside and close themselves off from the outside air. The temperature drops slowly, almost politely. At first it feels refreshing, then it feels unnecessary, then it feels uncomfortable. You realize that your clothing is not meant for this kind of cold, and neither is your body. People around you pull layers closer, adjusting garments that have been worn too many times to count. Nothing fits perfectly. Everything has been repaired at least once. Comfort is not something anyone expects anymore. You breathe in, and the air smells thick. Smoke hangs low, mixed with damp earth and old wood. There are other smells too, but no one bothers to separate them. The village has one shared scent, and it follows you everywhere. You begin to notice sounds that felt invisible during the day. A board creaks somewhere, an animal shifts behind a wall, a distant cough breaks the quiet and then fades again. Nothing dramatic happens, but nothing feels fully calm either. Darkness arrives quickly now. Not the kind that feels peaceful or soft, but the kind that removes details. Shapes lose their edges, familiar objects look strange. Your eyes try to adjust, but they never quite succeed. There are no lights to help them. You hold your hands out in front of you and barely see them. People here know where they are going without looking too closely. They move slowly and carefully, guided by memory more than sight. You do not have that advantage. The night feels heavier than the day, as if the air itself has settled lower. Even breathing feels slightly different, slower and more deliberate. You become aware of your own body in a way you usually are not, noticing small aches and tiredness that were easy to ignore before. Exhaustion comes early here, not because the day was exciting, but because it was long. Work did not stop when people felt tired, it stopped when it had to. As you pause near the center of the village, you realize how small the world feels now. During the day, the fields stretched outward. At night, everything pulls inward. The darkness presses close, shrinking the space you feel safe moving through. Doors are shut, openings are covered. People settle into their homes with the quiet focus of those who have done this hundreds of times before. No one expects the night to be kind, but everyone hopes it will be survivable. You imagine trying to sleep here later, not sinking into rest, but hovering near it, listening more than dreaming, waking at every unfamiliar sound, and then forcing yourself back into stillness. Sleep is not deep in this place. It is cautious and light, like something borrowed rather than owned. You also realize how long the night will be. Without clocks or glowing screens, time stretches. Darkness does not pass quickly when there is nothing to distract you from it. Minutes feel wide, hours feel endless. People measure nights by endurance, not comfort. Standing in the fading light, you understand something important. This village is not dangerous because of anything dramatic. It is dangerous because of how ordinary everything is. The cold, the dark, the tiredness, and the uncertainty all stack quietly on top of one another. No single thing pushes you over the edge, they just keep leaning in. If you had to stay here, really stay, the challenge would not be bravery or strength, it would be patience. It would be lasting through discomfort without relief. The final light disappears now, and the medieval night fully settles in. Fires dim, sounds soften. The village grows still, as if holding its breath. And this is only the beginning of the night. Nothing exciting happens, nothing dramatic appears. The quiet itself does the work. By the time morning comes, if it comes, you would understand why simply making it through the night was never guaranteed. Cold in medieval times was not a season, it was a background condition. It waited patiently through the day and stepped forward confidently at night, like it knew this was its time to shine, or more accurately, its time to chill everyone thoroughly. As the evening deepens, the temperature does not drop suddenly. It would almost be easier if it did. Instead, it slips away slowly, degree by degree, until you are not sure when you first became uncomfortable. You only know that you are now cold, and it feels personal. The air settles into everything. It presses against your skin, seeps through your clothes, and finds every gap you forgot to worry about. Sleeves feel thinner than they did an hour ago. Shoes feel like a suggestion rather than protection. Even standing still feels like a mistake. Medieval people did not expect to be warm at night. Warmth was a temporary experience, not a permanent state. You might feel it briefly near a fire or when pressed close to others, but it never stayed long enough to relax you. Cold here was patient. It did not rush. It did not need to. Buildings offered little resistance. Walls were thin and uneven. Gaps between boards allowed air to move freely, as if the wind had been personally invited inside. Roofs did their best, but their best was rarely enough. If you leaned against a wall, you could feel the night on the other side of it. There was no insulation to speak of. The house did not separate you from the cold. It introduced you to it slowly and politely. Fires helped, but not the way you might imagine. A small hearth could warm the space directly around it, but the heat faded quickly. Step a few feet away, and the cold reclaimed its territory immediately, like it had never left. People gathered near these fires not for comfort, but for survival. Even then, they never fully relaxed. Fires required attention. Left alone, they became a problem of their own, so warmth came with responsibility. When the fire dimmed for the night, the cold took over completely. Sleeping did not solve this. Lying down often made it worse. Bodies pressed against cold surfaces. Straw mattresses held moisture and chill. Wooden benches offered no softness and no warmth. Blankets existed, but they were heavy, rough, and not especially effective. They blocked some air, but they could not create heat. You relied on your own body to do most of the work, and your body got tired. People slept in their clothes, not because it was cozy, but because removing layers made no sense. Every piece of fabric mattered. Even then, it was rarely enough. You would notice the cold in your hands first. Fingers stiffened slowly, becoming less cooperative. Toes followed shortly after. No matter how you positioned yourself, some part of you always felt exposed. Over time, the cold moved inward. Muscles tightened, joints ached, rest became shallow because the body stayed alert, waiting for warmth that never fully arrived. This was normal. Children grew up knowing this feeling. Older people lived with it constantly. Complaining about the cold would have felt pointless. It was like complaining about night itself. The cold also changed how people moved. Every action became slower. Stretching out felt risky. Getting up required preparation. You planned movements carefully because once you were warm, even slightly, you did not want to waste it. This is something you would struggle with. Modern warmth has spoiled you. You expect heat to be steady and automatic. Here, it was fragile and temporary. Even breathing felt different. Cold air filled your lungs sharply, reminding you that warmth was something you had to earn, not something you were given. The cold was especially noticeable when you tried to rest. Your body wanted to relax, but relaxation invited chill. Muscles loosened, and warmth escaped. Staying tense helped retain heat, but it also made sleep difficult. So people rested in a strange balance between stiffness and exhaustion. They learned how to curl just right, how to tuck limbs inward, how to share body heat without much ceremony. Privacy did not matter. Warmth mattered. You might think the cold would become unbearable, but it rarely did in a dramatic way. Instead, it wore you down quietly. It drained energy, it shortened patience, it made small tasks feel heavier than they should. By morning, you were not frozen, you were simply tired. This constant cold shaped behavior. People stayed closer together. They avoided unnecessary movement. They ended days early not because they wanted to, but because the cold made everything harder after dark. Even conversations grew shorter. Talking required opening your mouth to the air. Silence conserved heat in its own small way. The cold also had a way of exaggerating other discomforts. Hunger felt sharper, fatigue felt deeper, fear felt closer. Everything combined into a steady, dull strain that never fully disappeared. You would notice this quickly. Within a few hours, you would realize that the cold was not something you could ignore. It demanded attention, whether you gave it willingly or not. There were no easy fixes, no switches to flip, no extra layers hiding nearby. You endured it because that was the only option. Medieval people measured nights not by how cold they were, but by whether the cold became worse than expected. A tolerable night was one where you woke up stiff but alive, tired but functional. That was success. As the hours passed, the cold settled into a steady presence. It no longer surprised you, it simply stayed. It reminded you that morning was still far away and that comfort was never guaranteed. You shifted position carefully, trying not to waste what little warmth you had built up. You listened to the sounds of others doing the same. Small movements, quiet adjustments, no one sleeping deeply enough to forget where they were. This was the medieval night at work, not dramatic, not violent, just persistent. By now, you would understand something important. The cold was not the enemy, it was the rule. It shaped every choice, every habit, every expectation. And as you lay there, waiting for dawn, you would realize that lasting through the night was not about strength, it was about accepting discomfort and staying still long enough for time to move forward on its own. The cold did not leave when you wanted it to. It stayed until morning decided to arrive. If you imagined a medieval home as a cozy wooden cottage with warm corners and solid walls, it is time to gently lower those expectations and place them somewhere out of reach. Homes in medieval times were not built to protect you from everything outside. They were built to be just enough of a barrier to say you were technically indoors. That was considered a success. Most houses were small, simple, and shaped by necessity rather than comfort. They were made from whatever materials were nearby, which meant wood, mud, straw, and a great deal of optimism. Walls were uneven, slightly lumpy, and never fully sealed. If the wind wanted to come inside, it did not need permission. You could feel the outside world through the walls. Cold passed through easily. Sounds passed through even easier. Privacy was more of an idea than a reality. Many homes were a single room, one space for cooking, resting, storing tools, and trying to sleep. There were no quiet corners, no spare rooms, no place to retreat when the day had been long and your patience had run out. If you lived here, this room would be your entire universe at night. The floor was usually packed earth. Sometimes it was covered with straw, sometimes not. Either way, it was never warm. It held on to cold like it was saving it for later. Sitting or lying on it meant meeting the chill directly, without introduction. Furniture was minimal. A bench, a table if you were lucky, maybe a chest that served multiple purposes, none of them particularly comfortable. Beds were rare and often shared. Most people slept on straw-filled sacks or simple mats that did very little to separate them from the ground. Walls were thin enough that you could hear neighbors breathe, talk, and occasionally argue. This was not considered rude, it was simply how buildings worked. Silence did not mean peace. It meant everyone was tired. Roofs were made from thatch or wooden shingles, carefully layered but never perfect. Rain found its way in. Snow settled where it could. The roof's job was not to block everything. It was to block most things most of the time. At night, you became very aware of this arrangement. Wind moved through gaps with ease. It slipped in around doors, through cracks in the walls, and between roof layers that had shifted over time. You could hear it before you felt it, a soft sound that meant the cold was about to join you again. Doors were heavy but simple. They closed with wooden bars or basic latches. They kept large problems out reasonably well. Small problems barely noticed them. Windows, if they existed, were small openings covered with cloth, shutters, or nothing at all. Glass was rare and expensive. Letting light in during the day meant letting cold in at night. People learned to accept the trade. Inside, air moved slowly but constantly. Smoke from cooking fires lingered, trapped by low ceilings and poor ventilation. It never fully cleared. It settled into hair, clothing, and lungs, becoming part of everyday life. You would notice it quickly. Your eyes would sting slightly, your throat would feel dry, breathing would take a bit more effort than expected. This was not considered unhealthy, it was considered normal. Homes also shared space with animals. This was practical, not sentimental. Animals provided warmth. They were valuable. Bringing them inside reduced the risk of losing them overnight. So you might find a cow, a goat, or chickens nearby as you tried to rest. They shifted, breathed, and occasionally made sounds that reminded you that sleep would be a light activity. The presence of animals meant smells, movement, and a general sense that the floor was never truly clean. Again, this was normal. Cleanliness was measured differently here. The idea of a home as a safe retreat did not fully exist. A house offered some shelter from weather and a thin line between you and the outside world. It did not promise comfort, quiet, or warmth. You learned not to expect those things. At night, shadows behaved strangely inside these homes. Firelight flickered and stretched shapes across walls that were already uneven. Familiar objects looked unfamiliar when your eyes were tired. People learned to ignore this. Staring too long made it worse. Noise traveled easily through these spaces. Every movement sounded louder at night. A footstep felt like an announcement. A cough echoed longer than intended. People became skilled at moving quietly, not to be polite, but to avoid unnecessary attention. Sleep happened in short stretches. People shifted often, adjusting positions to manage cold and discomfort. No one lay still for long. Stillness meant getting colder. You would struggle with this. You are used to beds that support you and rooms designed to stay quiet. Here, the house itself felt alive, constantly reminding you that it was barely holding together. And yet, these homes were familiar and deeply known to the people who lived in them. Every creak had a reason. Every draft had a direction.
People knew which sounds were harmless and which ones required attention. You would not have that knowledge. To you, every noise would feel new. Every movement outside the wall would seem important. The house would not reassure you. It would test you, gently but constantly. The walls did not block the night. They let it in slowly. You would lie there, aware of every breath, every shift, every sound passing through the thin structure around you. The house would not shield you from discomfort. It would simply exist alongside it. This is why medieval homes did not make people feel fully safe. They were not meant to. They were meant to function. Protection was partial. Comfort was optional. As the night went on, you would begin to understand that the house was not failing you. It was doing exactly what it was built to do. It was standing. It was sheltering you just enough. Expecting more would only make the night feel longer. And so you would settle in, adjusting to the space, learning its limits, and waiting quietly as the hours passed. The house would creak, the wind would move, and the night would continue without concern. Morning was still far away. And these walls would not hurry it along.
By the time night has fully settled in, sleep becomes the next task on the list. Not the pleasant kind of sleep you look forward to, but the practical kind that needs to happen whether conditions agree or not. In medieval times, sleeping was less about comfort and more about positioning yourself in a way that caused the least amount of regret. Beds, as you know them, were not common. For most people, sleep happened wherever it made the most sense at the end of the day. That might be on a wooden bench, on the floor, or on a sack filled with straw that had seen better years and probably better straw. These sleeping spots were not soft. They were negotiable at best. Straw mattresses were popular because straw was cheap and available. Over time, the straw flattened, shifted, and broke down. What began as a padded surface slowly turned into something uneven and slightly pokey. You did not lie down so much as you arranged yourself carefully and hoped for the best. Wooden beds existed, but even those were simple frames with ropes stretched across them. Over time, the ropes sagged, creating a gentle dip that made getting out of bed feel like climbing uphill. Mattresses placed on top did very little to improve the situation. If you were expecting pillows, it would be wise to adjust that thought. Anything supporting your head was usually a rolled-up cloth, a bundle of fabric, or an arm placed in the right position. Neck comfort was not discussed. You found a way to manage. Sleeping positions mattered a lot. Stretching out flat meant losing heat. Curling inward helped conserve warmth, even if it made your joints complain quietly. Most people slept on their sides, knees pulled in, arms tucked close. Sharing sleeping space was common, not because it was enjoyable, but because it made sense. Body heat mattered more than personal space. Families slept together, workers slept together, sometimes strangers slept closer than modern friends ever would. This closeness was practical and awkward at the same time. You learned to ignore small movements, breathing, and occasional snoring. Complaining would not improve anything, and besides, everyone was tired enough to tolerate it. Clothing stayed on during sleep. Removing layers would have been pointless. You slept in whatever you wore during the day, sometimes adding an extra garment if one was available. Buttons, seams, and rough fabric pressed against skin all night, but adjusting them required effort and exposed you to more cold. So you stayed mostly still. Sleep did not arrive smoothly. You did not sink into it. You hovered near it. Your body rested in short stretches, waking often to shift position, adjust clothing, or simply check that nothing had changed. Noise played a role here too. Animals moved nearby, someone coughed, wood creaked, wind pressed against walls. None of it was unusual, but all of it kept sleep light and careful. You would notice how alert your body stayed, even while exhausted. It never fully shut down. Muscles stayed slightly tense, breathing stayed shallow, sleep came in pieces instead of one long stretch. This kind of rest was normal. People did not expect to wake feeling refreshed, they expected to wake feeling capable enough to continue.
Children adapted quickly. They learned where to sleep and how to stay warm without much instruction. Adults adjusted their expectations. Older people accepted stiffness as part of the routine. You, however, would struggle with the lack of comfort. Your body would look for softness that did not exist. Your mind would wait for deep sleep that never quite arrived. Every small discomfort would feel larger because there was nothing else to focus on. At some point, you would notice that the floor felt harder than before. That is because it was. Straw shifted under weight, wood pressed back. There was no memory foam here, only gravity and patience. Turning over required planning. Moving too quickly wasted warmth and disturbed others. Moving too slowly made joints protest. You learned to turn carefully, like someone rearranging a stack of fragile objects. Blankets helped a little. They were heavy and rough, often made from wool that scratched just enough to remind you it was there. They blocked some air but trapped little heat. Still, you kept them close because doing nothing felt worse. You would also notice insects, not dramatically, just quietly. A small itch here, a brief irritation there. You learned not to scratch too much. Scratching meant movement. Movement meant cold. Eventually, exhaustion won small victories. You drifted off for short periods, waking again without knowing how long you had slept. Time felt unclear. Darkness erased clear markers. Dreams, if they came, were shallow and easily broken. Despite all this, sleep did happen, not because conditions were good, but because the body demanded it. People trusted this process. They did not fight it. They let tiredness do its work. By the middle of the night, everything felt slower. Thoughts softened, awareness dulled slightly. The cold remained, but it became familiar, like background noise you stopped questioning. You would reach this point eventually, but not without frustration. Modern sleep habits are spoiled by comfort. Here, sleep was earned through endurance. You would also realize something unexpected. The lack of comfort made sleep simpler in one way. There were no choices, no perfect positions to search for, no pillows to adjust endlessly. You accepted what was available and worked with it. That acceptance made rest possible. As the hours passed, bodies shifted less, the house settled, sounds blended together, sleep became deeper. Not because it was good, but because there was nothing left to resist. Morning was still far away, but the night no longer felt sharp. It felt long and dull, like a task that would eventually end if you stayed still enough. By the time light began to return, your body would feel stiff, your muscles tired, and your patience thin. But you had made it through the night, and that, in medieval times, counted as success.
Once you finally settle into your sleeping spot, you might think the hardest part is over. You are wrong, but in a very quiet way. Now comes the part where the night begins to talk to you. Not loudly, not clearly, just enough to keep you aware that silence is never truly silent. During the day, sound blends together, voices overlap, tools clatter, animals move around openly. At night, those same sounds separate and stretch out. Each one gets its own space, and your tired mind has plenty of time to notice them. The house itself is the first thing you hear. Wood cools as the air temperature drops, and it reacts by creaking softly. Not all at once, one board at a time. A slow reminder that the building is adjusting to the night, whether you are ready or not. At first, these sounds feel important. You listen closely, trying to understand what caused them. Was it the wind? Was it movement? Was it something else? After a while, you realize the house just does this. It always has. Then there are the animals. If animals share the space with you, and they often do, they bring their own collection of noises. A slow shift of weight, a quiet snort, the soft sound of breathing that is much louder at night than it should be. Animals do not worry about being quiet. They simply exist. Outside, more animals move through the dark. Dogs bark occasionally, not in excitement, but in brief warning. One bark, then silence again. You never find out what caused it, and no one rushes to investigate. Somewhere farther away, something else moves through the grass or along a fence. You hear it, but you cannot place it. The sound is too small to matter and too steady to ignore completely. Your mind fills in possibilities, none of which are helpful for sleep. Wind plays a major role in the nighttime soundtrack. It slips through cracks, brushes against walls, and rattles loose pieces of wood. Sometimes it sounds like footsteps. Sometimes it sounds like someone sighing very close to your ear. It is just air doing what air does, but that explanation doesn't always feel convincing at 2 in the morning. The village itself is quieter now, but not asleep. You hear coughing from nearby homes. Someone turns over. A door shifts slightly in its frame. These sounds remind you that you are not alone, even when it feels like you are. Occasionally, a voice murmurs briefly, then stops. No conversation follows. Words are not meant to travel far at night. They are used sparingly. You begin to notice how sound moves differently in the dark. Without visual confirmation, every noise feels larger. Distance is hard to judge. Something nearby can sound far away. Something far away can sound uncomfortably close. This makes your body stay alert, even when your mind wants to rest. You listen without meaning to. You wait for patterns. You try to decide which sounds matter. Most of them do not. Still, your ears stay busy. Insects add a steady layer beneath everything else. A soft buzzing, a faint clicking, not loud enough to focus on, but always present. It fills the quiet spaces, making sure the night never feels empty. Sometimes the insects stop all at once. That moment of silence feels heavier than the noise did. You wait to see if something replaces it. Usually nothing does, and the insects slowly return to their work. Inside the house, small movements feel exaggerated. Someone adjusts their position. Straw shifts, fabric brushes against fabric. Each sound feels like it might wake everyone else, even though everyone else is doing the same thing. People learn to move carefully at night, not silently, just gently. There's no benefit in drawing attention to yourself, even among people who know you well. You also hear breathing, your own and others nearby. In the dark, breathing becomes noticeable in a way it usually is not. Slow breaths, shallow breaths, occasional sighs. It's strangely calming and slightly unsettling at the same time. Your own body adds to the noise, whether you like it or not. Joints shift, your stomach makes a small sound that you pretend not to hear. Your clothes rustle when you move, louder than expected. You try to stay still, not because movement is forbidden, but because stillness feels safer. When you don't move, the night doesn't seem to notice you as much. The problem is that stillness gives you time to listen more closely. At some point, you hear a sound you cannot explain immediately. It might be outside, it might be inside, it might just be the house settling again. You hold your breath for a moment, waiting for it to repeat. Often, it does not. This happens more than once. The night offers small mysteries and then refuses to solve them. You learn to let them go because holding on to them makes the hours feel longer. People who grew up here learned early which sounds mattered. A sudden crash, a loud shout, something clearly out of place. Everything else faded into background noise over time. You do not have that skill yet, so you listen, you wait. You slowly get used to the idea that the night makes noise, and that most of it does not require action. Eventually, exhaustion softens your focus. Sounds blur together. The house creaks and you barely react. An animal shifts and you don't open your eyes. The wind moves and you accept it without question. This is when sleep becomes possible. Not deep sleep, just enough. The night does not become quiet, but it becomes predictable. The sounds repeat often enough that they stop feeling important. Your mind lets them pass without comment. By now, the hours have stretched and folded in strange ways. You are no longer sure how long you have been lying there. Time is measured by tiredness instead of clocks. Somewhere farther away, the village remains still. No excitement, no urgency, just people and animals sharing space with the dark, listening to the same familiar sounds they've heard all their lives.
You would eventually reach this point too, where the noise no longer feels like a threat. It just feels like the night doing its job. The sounds continue, steady and unbothered. They do not hurry. They do not stop. And as they carry on, you drift closer to rest, not because the night is quiet, but because you have finally stopped asking it to be.
By the time the night has settled into its slow rhythm, another presence makes itself known. It does not announce itself, it does not make noise. It simply waits, comfortably unnoticed, like it always has. Illness in medieval times did not arrive with drama. It arrived quietly and stayed longer than anyone wanted. You do not feel sick right now. That is part of the problem. During the day, people worked through aches and tiredness without much thought. Small pains were expected. Feeling weak now and then was normal. The body was always a little worn down, so there was no clear line between being healthy and being unwell. At night, though, awareness sharpened. When everything else slowed down, the body became harder to ignore. You notice a tightness in your throat. It might be nothing. You feel a chill that seems deeper than before. It might just be the cold. Your head feels heavy, your limbs slower than they were earlier. None of these things feel urgent, they just feel present. Medieval living conditions gave illness plenty of opportunities. Air inside homes stayed thick and stale. Smoke lingered long after fires burned low. Shared spaces meant shared everything else as well, including whatever small troubles people carried with them. You breathed the same air as everyone around you. You touched the same surfaces. You slept close enough to feel each other move. This closeness made life possible, but it also meant there was no real distance between one person's weakness and another's. At night, the body had time to react. A cough from someone nearby echoed longer than expected. Another followed later, softer this time. No one commented. Coughing was common. So was pretending it meant nothing. You lay there, listening, wondering if your own breathing sounds different than usual. It probably does. Everything sounds different at night. People did not talk much about illness unless it became impossible to ignore. There was no benefit in worrying early. Worry did not change outcomes. It only made the night longer. Instead, people noticed patterns. A cough that lasted too long, a weakness that did not improve after rest, a feverish warmth that felt wrong rather than comforting. These things were noted quietly and set aside until morning. Night was not for fixing problems, it was for getting through them. Your body feels tired in a way that sleep does not fully solve. Muscles ache from work, but there is another kind of heaviness underneath it, a slow drain, a sense that resting is helping less than it should. You shift slightly, trying to get comfortable without losing warmth. The movement reminds you of how stiff everything feels. You tell yourself it is normal. Most people feel like this at the end of the day. And most people are right. Still, the thought lingers. What if it is more than tiredness? This is how illness lived in medieval times, not as a sudden event, but as a quiet question that followed you into the night. You noticed it more when the dark gave you nothing else to focus on. Children slept closer to adults for this reason, not for comfort alone, but for reassurance. A parent's presence meant someone would notice if breathing changed or warmth increased. It was a simple system, but it was all they had. Adults relied on routine. If you woke feeling worse than the night before, that meant something. If you woke feeling the same, you carried on. There were no easy ways to separate yourself if you felt unwell. Staying apart meant losing warmth and help, so people stayed close and hoped their bodies would handle things quietly. The night offered no answers. It only gave you time to notice small changes. You might feel a slight ache behind your eyes, a dull pressure in your chest, a fatigue that sits deeper than muscle soreness. None of these stop you from resting, but they prevent full ease. Sleep comes and goes. You drift off briefly, then wake again, aware of your own breathing. Is it slower, faster? You cannot tell. The dark makes everything feel uncertain. People learned to accept this uncertainty. They did not analyze symptoms. They observed them and moved on. Overthinking was a luxury that made long nights unbearable. You try to do the same. You focus on staying warm. You slow your breathing.
You let tiredness soften your thoughts. Nearby, someone shifts and sighs. Another cough sounds, then fades. No one reacts. It is just part of the night. Illness did not always show itself clearly. Sometimes it waited until morning. Sometimes it waited days. Night was just where it announced its presence softly, like a reminder that the body was always under negotiation. You would feel this more strongly than most. Your body is used to consistency, regular meals, clean air, controlled temperatures. Here, everything is unpredictable, and the body responds by staying alert. That alertness makes rest shallow. Even so, people survived this way, not because conditions were good, but because the human body is stubborn. It adjusts, it compensates, it carries on until it cannot, and then it rests whether it wants to or not. As the night deepens, your awareness dulls again. The aches stop asking for attention. The heaviness settles into the background. You are not better, but you are not worse either. This is considered a good night. Illness does not chase you. It does not need to. It waits patiently, knowing that tomorrow will come whether you feel ready or not. You drift into another short stretch of sleep, your body conserving energy in small, careful ways. The night holds you in the same quiet uncertainty it holds everyone else. Nothing dramatic happens. No sudden changes. Just the steady presence of a body doing its best under difficult conditions. By morning, you will take stock again. For now, you rest where you can. And the medieval night continues, slow and unbothered, giving illness no special attention, because here, it never needed any.
Fire is still awake when most other things have settled down. It glows quietly, doing its job without much praise. In medieval times, fire was the closest thing to comfort people had at night, and also the thing they watched most carefully. It helped, but it never fully relaxed anyone. Earlier in the evening, the fire felt helpful. It warmed hands and faces. It made the room feel a little less empty. People gathered near it without talking much, letting the warmth do what it could. No one expected miracles. Fire was not there to make things pleasant. It was there to make things possible. As night moved on, the fire changed. Flames lowered, light softened, heat stayed close to the source instead of spreading through the room. Step back a little, and the cold reminded you who was really in charge. Keeping a fire going took effort. Wood was not endless. Fuel had to be used carefully. Letting a fire burn too strong meant wasting resources. Letting it burn too low meant losing warmth too soon. Every fire was a balance, and balance required attention. Before sleeping, someone checked it one last time, not with excitement, not with worry, just with routine. A few pieces of wood adjusted, embers spread slightly, enough to last a while, hopefully. Then people moved away and tried to rest. The fire did not disappear. It stayed present, glowing softly, casting long shadows across walls that were already uneven. Objects stretched and shrank as the light flickered. A pot hanging nearby looked larger than it should. A tool resting against the wall looked unfamiliar for a moment. Your tired eyes tried to make sense of it, then gave up. Fire made small sounds as it settled, a quiet crack, a soft shift, a low hiss when a piece of wood adjusted itself. These sounds blended into the night, noticeable but not alarming. Still, the fire demanded respect. Everyone knew what could happen if it was ignored. Homes were built from materials that burned easily: wood, straw, dry thatch. Fire did not need encouragement, it only needed time. So no one slept deeply near it. Someone always remained slightly aware, even while resting. It was not fear, it was habit. The fire's warmth came with limits. It warmed the front of your body while leaving your back cold. It helped your hands but did little for your feet. It created comfort in small pockets rather than filling the room. You adjusted yourself carefully, inching closer without getting too close. Too near meant heat that was uncomfortable. Too far meant cold that was worse. Finding the right distance felt like a quiet skill.
Blankets were positioned to catch warmth without blocking airflow. Clothing was arranged to avoid sparks. Everything happened slowly, thoughtfully, and without much discussion. Firelight also made time feel strange. Shadows moved even when nothing else did. The room never looked quite the same from one moment to the next. It was calming in a repetitive way, but it kept your eyes busy when they should have been resting. Eventually, the fire settled into embers. The room grew darker. The warmth faded gradually, giving the cold permission to return. You noticed it immediately, even if you pretended not to. This is when people faced a choice: add more fuel or let the fire rest. Adding fuel meant warmth, but it also meant staying awake longer. It meant watching the fire again. It meant risking sparks when everyone was tired. Often, people chose to let it fade. Cold was predictable. Fire was not. You pulled your clothing closer and shifted your position. The loss of warmth felt sharp for a few minutes, then dull. Your body adjusted because it had no other option. The fire still glowed faintly, more memory than presence. It was enough to remind you that warmth existed somewhere, even if it was not reaching you right now. Fire also affected the air. Smoke lingered long after flames quieted. It hung low, making breathing feel heavier. Eyes stung slightly, throats felt dry. This was accepted without comment. Opening gaps to let smoke escape also let cold rush in. People learned to tolerate the smoke instead. You breathed shallowly and slowly. It helped. Despite everything, fire was appreciated. Without it, nights would have been far worse. It cooked food, it dried clothes, it gave light when there was none. It allowed people to function after sunset at all. But it never let anyone forget its other side. A spark jumping the wrong way, a piece of wood rolling unexpectedly, a draft feeding flames when no one was watching. Everyone had heard stories. Everyone knew someone who had lost something because of fire. So even as it helped, it kept people alert. You would feel this tension more than most. You're used to heat that behaves. Fire here feels alive, unpredictable, and slightly stubborn. It does not obey settings or schedules. It does what it wants within reason. As the hours passed, the fire became quieter. Embers dimmed, light faded. The room returned to shadow. Cold reclaimed the space fully, moving back in without apology. The fire had done what it could. You lay there, feeling the difference clearly. Without the fire, the night felt heavier, still manageable, but less forgiving. You missed the warmth, even though it had been limited. This was another lesson of medieval nights. Comfort came in small doses and never stayed long. You took it when it appeared and adjusted when it left. Fire did not promise safety or ease. It offered brief help and required constant respect in return. People accepted this arrangement without question. By now, exhaustion softened your awareness again. The fire faded into the background. The cold became familiar. Sounds blended together. Your body settled into stillness. Morning was still far away, but another part of the night had passed. The fire rested, the house creaked softly, and you waited quietly for time to continue doing what it always did.
When the fire has settled and most movement has stopped, sound becomes the loudest thing in the room. Not clear sound, not helpful sound, just the kind that exists without explanation. Medieval nights were full of it, and none of it cared whether you felt ready. During the day, noise had shape. Tools hit wood. Feet moved across floors. Voices belonged to people you could see. At night, sound lost its source. It drifted, echoed, and faded without ever introducing itself. You lie still and listen. A soft scrape comes from somewhere near the wall. It is not loud enough to be alarming, but it is not quiet enough to ignore. It stops. Then, after a pause that feels too long to be accidental, it happens again. No one reacts. That tells you more than the sound itself. Houses were never silent. Wood expanded and contracted as temperatures changed. Walls shifted slightly under their own weight. Roof beams adjusted. These movements produced small noises that people learned to recognize without thinking. You, however, notice every one of them. Something moves overhead, a faint scurry, light and quick. It crosses, stops, then continues. You imagine what it might be, then remind yourself not to. Knowing would not improve the situation. Rodents were a fact of life. They shared space the way people did, quietly and persistently. At night, they became active, exploring the same areas they had explored the night before and the one before that. You tell yourself they are small. You tell yourself they are harmless. You tell yourself not to move. Movement would draw attention. Stillness meant blending into the background. This was understood instinctively. Outside, the wind changes direction. It presses against the building, then slides past it. Gaps in walls and roofs let air pass through, creating low sounds that rise and fall slowly. It almost sounds like breathing if you let your mind wander too far. You do not. Somewhere in the distance, an animal makes a noise. It is not close enough to matter, but it is close enough to hear. The sound carries through the quiet, then disappears as if it never existed. Night noises had no obligation to repeat themselves. Closer by, someone shifts in their sleep. Fabric rubs softly. A quiet sigh follows. This sound is comforting. It is human. It reminds you that you are not alone, even if you feel very awake. Then there is a thump. Not loud, not sharp, just heavy enough to notice. It could be something settling. It could be something falling over slightly. It could be nothing at all. The problem is that you cannot check without consequences. Looking means moving. Moving means cold. Moving means drawing attention to yourself. So you stay still and let the moment pass. People did not investigate sounds at night unless they had to. Curiosity was reserved for daylight. At night, the safest option was patience. Your breathing slows as you try to match the stillness around you. The more still you are, the less involved you feel. This makes the sounds feel less personal, more like background noise you do not need to solve. A faint tapping begins somewhere near the roof. Irregular, light, then gone. You decide it is wind because that explanation requires the least effort. This is how medieval nights stayed manageable, not through certainty, but through choosing the simplest explanation and sticking with it. Eventually, your awareness dulls. Sounds still happen, but they don't pull you fully awake anymore. They pass through your thoughts instead of stopping them. Your body begins to rest despite the noise, not because it feels safe, but because it feels inevitable. The night will make its sounds whether you listen or not. Someone nearby snores quietly for a moment, then stops. The interruption feels almost soothing. It is predictable in a way the other sounds are not. You realize something then. The night is not louder than the day. It's just less distracted. With nothing else competing for attention, every sound feels important. As tiredness deepens, even that importance fades. Your breathing slows, your muscles loosen. The sounds continue, but they no longer demand answers. They exist, and you exist with them. By the time sleep settles more fully, the night feels less like a threat and more like a presence. Not friendly, not hostile, just there. And that's enough. The dark keeps its sounds. You keep your stillness, and another hour of the medieval night quietly passes.
At some point in the night, you wake up, without meaning to. There is no loud noise, no sudden movement, no clear reason at all. Your eyes simply open, and you are aware again. This happens often in medieval times. Sleep does not stay deep for long. You do not know how much time has passed. It could be minutes, it could be hours. Darkness looks the same either way. The fire is nearly gone now, reduced to a faint memory of warmth. The room feels colder than before, but not sharply so.
more like a steady pressure that never fully leaves. Your body feels heavy, but not rested. This waking is normal. People expected it. Nights were not one long stretch of sleep. They were broken into parts, with quiet waking in between. No one panicked about it. There was nothing to check, nowhere to go, nothing to fix. So you lie still. Around you, others are awake too, even if you cannot tell. A small shift of fabric, a careful breath. Someone clears their throat softly and then goes quiet again. These sounds tell you that you are not the only one caught between sleeping and waking. The cold feels stronger when you are awake. While asleep, you barely noticed it. Now it presses in slowly, especially around your feet and hands. You resist the urge to move. Movement would let warmth escape, and it would take too long to regain it. So you stay exactly where you are. Your thoughts wander, but not far. Tiredness keeps them slow and dull. You think about nothing in particular. The day before drifts through your mind in soft pieces. Work done, food eaten, small conversations already fading. Tomorrow feels distant and close at the same time. People often used this quiet waking time to think, not deeply, just gently. There was no pressure to sleep immediately again. The night was long, sleep would return when it was ready. You focus on your breathing, in and out, slow, shallow enough to keep warmth close. Your body knows what to do, even if your mind does not. The room feels different now. Without the firelight, shapes blend together, corners disappear. The ceiling feels farther away. You are aware of space without seeing it clearly. Somewhere outside, the wind shifts again. It is softer now, less active. The night feels settled, like it has reached the middle of itself. You wonder briefly how people managed this night after night. Then you realize the answer is simple. They did not question it. This was normal. Expecting anything else would have made it harder. Your modern habits work against you here. You expect full rest. You expect comfort. You expect sleep to behave. Medieval sleep does not care what you expect. Your back aches slightly from the hard surface. Your neck feels stiff. You shift just a little, slowly enough that the cold does not rush in. The movement helps some places and worsens others. You accept the trade. Someone nearby murmurs in their sleep, then settles again. The sound is low and meaningless, but it feels reassuring. It confirms that time is still moving, even if it feels stuck. This waking stretch does not last forever. Eventually, tiredness grows heavier again. Your eyes feel warm and slow. Thoughts lose their edges. You stop listening for sounds without deciding to. Sleep returns the way it left, quietly and without asking. When you wake again, the darkness has changed slightly. It is still dark, but thinner, less solid. You cannot see light yet, but you can feel it approaching. This second waking feels different, more final. Your body feels stiff now. Limbs protest when you move even a little. Joints remind you that rest here is not the same as recovery. Still, you are used to this kind of discomfort now. It no longer surprises you. Around you, people begin to stir more openly, not all at once, one at a time. A stretch here, a soft yawn there. No one rushes. Morning does not arrive suddenly. It seeps in slowly. The fire will need attention soon. The day will need effort. But for now, there is still a small pocket of quiet left. You lie there and let it pass. This time between night and morning is its own thing. Not quite rest, not quite work. Just a pause where the body prepares itself without being asked. Outside, the world begins to wake in subtle ways. A distant sound carries briefly, then fades. Something moves, far off, unseen. Inside, people begin to sit up, carefully, slowly. No sudden movements. Muscles are stiff. Cold has settled deep during the night. You follow, pushing yourself upright with more effort than expected. The floor feels colder now. The air feels sharper. You pull your clothing closer around you, even though it doesn't help much. The night is almost over. You made it through, but not easily.
Your sleep was shallow, your body is tired, your mind feels slow. This is how morning begins in medieval times. Not refreshed, not energized, just functional. And that's enough. As the first weak light begins to show, you understand something clearly. Surviving the night was never about comfort. It was about patience, about letting time pass without fighting it. You would not call this a good night, but you would call it successful, and in medieval times, that mattered more.
Morning does not arrive gently. It does not ease you awake or wait for your body to feel ready. It simply shows up, pale and thin, slipping into the room through cracks and gaps that never fully closed. The light is weak, but it is enough to change everything. You notice it before you open your eyes. The darkness feels different now, less complete. The room no longer belongs entirely to the night. The cold feels sharper too, as if daylight gives it permission to be noticed again. Your body knows what this means. Sleep lets go slowly, not because it wants to, but because it has no choice. Muscles feel stiff and unwilling. Your back complains as soon as you move. Your neck feels like it has forgotten how to turn properly. You sit up carefully. Everyone does. There is no rushing, no alarms, no clear signal that the day has begun. People simply start moving when they cannot stay still anymore. A quiet agreement spreads through the room without words. The floor is cold in a way that feels personal. It reaches through your feet immediately, reminding you that the fire has been resting for hours. You pull your clothing tighter, even though it already feels like it is part of you. No one stretches dramatically. Big movements waste energy and invite discomfort. People move in small, controlled ways, protecting joints that already have work ahead of them. Someone goes to the fire first. This task matters. Without it, nothing else happens properly. A few pieces of wood are added, embers are coaxed back to life, smoke appears before warmth does. The smell of it fills the room, thick and familiar. Your eyes sting slightly. You blink and wait for it to settle. This is normal. Everything in the morning is a little unpleasant at first. As the fire wakes, people wake more fully. Hands are rubbed together. Shoulders roll slowly. Someone coughs once, then clears their throat and moves on. There is no discussion of how the night went. No one asks if you slept well. The answer is understood. Sleep was enough to survive, not enough to enjoy. You stand when you are ready. Standing takes effort. Blood shifts. Balance feels uncertain for a moment. You wait until the feeling passes. The room looks different in daylight. Smaller somehow. The shadows that made it feel larger at night have pulled back. Everything feels closer, more solid, and less forgiving. Objects you barely noticed before now demand attention. Tools leaning where they were left, containers waiting to be used, clothing that needs adjusting before work begins. The night feels distant already, even though your body still carries it. Morning routines begin quietly, not because people are calm, but because energy is being saved. Talking can wait. First, the body needs to wake fully. Food is simple. There is no ceremony. Eating is about function. Warmth from the fire matters more than taste. Even holding something warm makes a difference. You eat slowly, feeling stiffness loosen slightly with each movement. The warmth does not last long, but it helps enough to make the next hour possible. Outside, the day reveals itself without enthusiasm. The sky is pale, the air is cold, everything feels unfinished, like it needs effort before it becomes useful. People step outside when they must. Each breath feels sharp at first, then dulls as the body adjusts again. Adjusting is a skill here. The body practices it constantly. You notice how little anyone complains, not because things are easy, but because complaining changes nothing. Words cost energy. Energy is better spent on movement. The night's discomfort does not get discussed. It fades into routine, becoming just another part of the day that must be carried. As work begins, the body warms slowly. Muscles remember their purpose. Stiffness becomes manageable. Pain settles into familiar places and stops asking for attention. You realize then how the night fits into this life. It is not a separate thing. It is part of a long cycle of effort and rest that never fully resets. Sleep does not prepare you for the day. It simply prevents you from collapsing before it arrives.
People move with a quiet understanding of their limits. No one expects to feel good. Feeling capable is enough. You, however, feel the weight of it more clearly. Your body is used to mornings that offer a fresh start. Here, mornings offer continuation. Yesterday does not end, it just pauses. The memory of the night lingers in small ways, a slight ache, a lingering chill, a tiredness that sits behind your eyes. You carry it with you as you work, as everyone does. Still, there is something steady about this routine, something grounding. The predictability of it all dulls frustration. There are no surprises in the morning, only tasks that need doing. As the sun rises higher, warmth slowly improves. Not much, but enough to notice. The fire inside the home burns more confidently now. Outside, light spreads across the ground. The night feels farther away with each passing hour. You would not say you are rested, but you are awake. And in medieval times, that's the important part. You survived the night, you stood up again, and the day moved forward without waiting for comfort. That's how mornings begin here. Not with kindness, just with continuation.
As the day moves forward, you begin to notice something that never quite leaves. It sits beneath every movement, every breath, every task. The body does not reset here. It carries yesterday into today without apology. You feel it first in small ways. When you bend, it takes longer to straighten again. When you lift something light, it feels heavier than it should. Your hands feel slow, like they are waking up hours after the rest of you. No one mentions this feeling, no one names it. It is simply how bodies behave when rest is shallow and work is constant. People here do not expect to feel strong in the morning. Strength appears later, after movement has warmed muscles and repetition has reminded the body what it needs to do. Even then, it is a careful kind of strength, one that knows its limits. You move through tasks steadily, not quickly. Speed wastes energy. Efficiency is quiet and patient. Every action is done with an awareness of what it costs. The night never fully leaves the body. It stays in the joints, in the lower back, in the shoulders that carried weight the day before. Sleep eased the sharpest edges, but it did not repair anything. You notice how often people pause, not dramatic breaks, just brief moments where movement slows or stops. A hand rests on a knee, a shoulder rolls once, slowly. A breath is taken with more attention than usual. These pauses are built into the day. They are not signs of weakness, they are part of survival. You try to ignore the dull ache behind your eyes. It feels like the leftover shadow of sleep that never quite finished its work. Bright light makes it worse. Smoke from the fire does not help either. Still, you keep going. People here learned to listen to their bodies without indulging them. Pain was information, not instruction. It told you where limits were, not when to stop entirely. You adjust how you move. You lift differently. You lean when you can. You sit when there is a reason. Standing still for too long makes everything stiff again. The body prefers motion, even when tired. As hours pass, the morning cold fades. Warmth settles into muscles slowly, making them more cooperative. The ache becomes familiar, easier to ignore. This is when work feels most manageable. Not easy, just manageable. You begin to understand why sleep was treated the way it was, not as a cure, but as a pause. The body was never expected to feel new again. It was expected to last. Meals help a little, not because they are generous, but because they are warm and predictable. The body responds to routine more than comfort. Eating tells it that energy is coming, that it can keep going. You eat without distraction. No one rushes this part. Even small comforts are respected. As the day continues, fatigue shifts. It becomes less sharp and more spread out. Instead of specific aches, there is a general heaviness, a sense that everything requires a little more effort than it should. This heaviness does not stop people. It slows them slightly, that is all. You notice how carefully people protect themselves from unnecessary strain. Tools are used instead of hands when possible.
Loads are shared, tasks are divided in ways that keep anyone from being pushed too far. Community here is practical, it exists because it has to. Your modern instincts tell you that this is unsustainable, that the body needs more rest, more care, more recovery, and you are not wrong. But survival is not built around ideals, it is built around what works long enough. Bodies here are not maintained, they are managed. In the afternoon, tiredness returns in waves. It does not announce itself loudly, it simply makes everything feel slower. Thinking takes more effort. Reactions lag slightly. People accept this too. Tasks that require precision are done earlier in the day. Later hours are for simpler work, repetition, familiar movements. No one expects peak performance all day. The rhythm of work adjusts naturally. You feel the urge to sit and stay sitting, to let your muscles rest fully. But you know that if you stop too long, standing again will feel worse. So you keep moving. Gently, steadily. The body responds by cooperating just enough. As hours approach evening, the weight of the previous night begins to matter again, not because it was especially bad, but because another night is coming. You realize then how the cycle works. Each night leaves a mark. Each day carries it forward. There is no clean break, just layers. People do not talk about recovery because recovery implies a return to something better. Here, there is only continuation. Still, there is a kind of balance in this. The body adapts to its own condition. It learns where to conserve energy and where to spend it. It becomes efficient in ways comfort never teaches. You feel this happening slowly, even in yourself. Movements become smaller. Breathing becomes more controlled. You stop wasting effort on things that do not matter. By late afternoon, fatigue settles deep into the muscles. It feels heavier now, but also calmer. The sharp edges are gone. What remains is a steady, manageable tiredness. This is when people begin to prepare for night again, not with excitement, with quiet acceptance. You know what is coming. Cold, darkness, another night that will test patience more than strength. Your body does not look forward to it, but it also does not resist. It knows the pattern now. The day ends without ceremony. The body is still tired. It will be tired again tomorrow. This is not failure. This is how life continues here. You are not restored. You are not refreshed. You are simply still standing. And in medieval times, that means your body is doing exactly what it was meant to do.
In medieval times, food was never luxurious. It did not arrive in tempting portions or with careful seasoning. It existed to keep the body alive and moving, and nothing more. By the time morning tasks have passed, your stomach reminds you that energy is needed, but the options are simple, and often barely enough. Most people ate what could be grown nearby, fields of grains, a few vegetables, and whatever fruit was in season. Meat was rare for the common household, not because people did not want it, but because raising animals was expensive and usually prioritized for sale or trade rather than immediate consumption. Bread, porridge, and stews became the main diet, repeated with small variations from one day to the next. The meals were filling enough, but they never left you satisfied in the way modern food can. You could eat and still feel a hollow spot in your stomach hours later. Hunger was a steady companion in life, not an emergency that arrived suddenly. Breakfast was simple. Often it was porridge made from oats or barley, cooked in water or a thin milk substitute. Sometimes a little salt or herbs were added. The taste was plain, the texture was thick and heavy. You ate quickly to let your stomach settle before starting work. Taste was a distraction from function, not enjoyment. Lunch, when it occurred, was similar. Bread, a small portion of vegetables, maybe some cheese if you were lucky. Meat was exceptional, not routine. People ate to survive, not to savor. The body learned to accept this without complaint. By the afternoon, the lack of rich flavor becomes obvious. Food is fuel, not pleasure. Chewing is slow because the body is tired. You notice textures and tastes only in passing, but the effect is enough to keep going. Energy returns in small increments, enough for movement, enough for the next task, but never luxurious. Meals were also dictated by time and labor. You ate when it was possible to do so without disrupting work, not when your body demanded it. The rhythm of life here was work, eat, work again, and prepare for night. Meals punctuated days, but they were functional markers, not highlights. Food storage was another challenge. Fresh produce spoiled quickly. Grain and dried goods lasted longer, but could be infested or ruined if handled improperly. People learned to plan for scarcity. Nothing was wasted. Leftovers, when available, were eaten the next day, regardless of taste. Cooking methods were simple. Fires were used for boiling and roasting, with utensils that were basic and multi-purpose. Porridge simmered for hours, bread baked in communal ovens, stews stirred occasionally to prevent burning. Precision and seasoning were secondary to simply making it edible. You notice how small meals affect your energy throughout the day. You are never fully fueled, but never completely depleted. The body operates in a constant state of mild hunger. Movement feels more effortful. Strength is present, but fragile. It teaches caution in ways comfort never does. Sharing food was practical. Families ate together, often in the same space where they worked and slept. This meant passing dishes and coordinating meals quietly so that no one wasted time or warmth moving unnecessarily. The shared act of eating created a rhythm, but not a celebration. Conversation was limited to brief exchanges. Function ruled over socializing. Even when the fire was active, warmth from food was brief. Eating could warm hands and face, but did not penetrate the body fully. It took repeated small portions over time to sustain energy enough for work and the upcoming night. Drinking was similar. Water or thin ale was common. Milk, when available, was added to porridge or consumed in small quantities. There were no sweet drinks, no caffeine, no flavor enhancements. Hydration was practical, not enjoyable. You start to notice how the timing of meals affects the body. Morning food fuels early work. Afternoon food sustains the slow hours. By evening, when work begins to wind down and night approaches, the stomach signals mild hunger again. This signals the cycle is ready to repeat. Hunger was never an emergency. It was steady, persistent, a reminder of the day's pace. Bodies adapted to it over time. You learn quickly that trying to eat too quickly or too much disrupts the small equilibrium your stomach maintains. Function is more important than fullness. Despite its plainness, food was essential. Without it, survival was impossible. Even the smallest portions became a lifeline. People appreciated this silently. Gratitude existed in the way hands worked around fire and pots, in the way meals were shared and preserved, but it was quiet, internal, practical. Children learned early to accept the flavorless portions. Adults rarely complained. Hunger became a steady rhythm, part of the steady cadence of life. You notice how little room there is for indulgence. Energy was meant to be conserved, not wasted. As evening approaches, food once again becomes a preparation for night. A small meal is eaten, enough to sustain warmth and energy for sleep. Nothing indulgent, nothing rich, just enough to prevent collapse. You notice that the body begins to store what little energy it can. Warmth from food mingles with heat from clothing and fire. The night will demand more than the day, and you must be ready. By now, you understand that meals are not a reward, they are a tool, part of the cycle that allows life to continue. Flavor, texture, and pleasure are secondary. Nutrition is function. Timing is survival. Eating is work, and work is necessary. Even when hunger returns, it is familiar. The stomach reminds you gently. You do not panic, you do not complain, you accept it. This acceptance is part of enduring nights, cold, and the constant demands of life. In medieval times, survival depended on the body being fed enough to function, but never enough to feel satisfied. Hunger was a companion, not a threat.
Meals were fuel, shared quietly, respected without indulgence, and relied upon without hesitation. By nightfall, when another cold and long night approaches, the cycle of eating, working, and waiting for rest prepares the body for endurance once more. The lessons of meals are subtle but firm. Survival is about pacing, acceptance, and managing small comforts without expectation. You will eat again tomorrow, not for pleasure, but for continuation. And that is enough to keep moving.
In medieval times, work did not stop because it was inconvenient or tiring. The day was dictated by light, tasks, and survival. By the time your morning routines and meals are complete, there's little time to rest. Work begins, not with enthusiasm, but with necessity. Tasks are simple, repetitive, and physically demanding. You might fetch water from a nearby well, chop wood for the fire, tend to small livestock, or repair tools and structures. Each movement is deliberate, not hurried. Speed wastes energy, and energy is scarce. Efficiency matters more than excellence. Children often start work early. They are taught to perform small, manageable tasks that support the household. Fetching water, gathering firewood, and helping with simple chores keeps them busy while instilling the rhythm of labor. Their bodies adjust quickly, but their minds are always learning patience and repetition. Adults carry heavier burdens. Fields must be tended, animals fed, and shelter maintained. Tools are basic and sometimes blunt, making every task more difficult. Wood splitting requires careful positioning to avoid injury. Hauling water or grain strains the back and shoulders, reminding you that endurance is necessary more than strength. Work is continuous, broken only by meals, personal needs, or the fading light. There's no concept of overtime or breaks. The day ends when the tasks are complete or when darkness makes progress impossible. Even then, preparation for the night begins immediately, ensuring warmth and shelter before rest. Tasks are repetitive, yet each day carries small variations. Weather changes affect how fields are plowed or which animals need attention first. Equipment breaks or malfunctions, demanding quick improvisation. Food supplies shift, requiring adjustments in gathering or cooking. Life is never static. The body learns to endure in these conditions. Muscles grow accustomed to repetitive strain. Fatigue becomes predictable, allowing individuals to pace themselves without stopping entirely. Even minor injuries are managed carefully, often without proper treatment. The focus remains on continuation rather than recovery. Concentration is quiet but constant. Mistakes can be costly. A fallen bucket of water, a dropped tool, or a mismanaged task could result in lost time or energy. Attention to detail is learned through repetition, observation, and experience. There is no room for carelessness. Communication is functional. People speak only when necessary. Directions are given quietly, commands are minimal, and explanations are short. Talking during work wastes energy and time. Noise is reserved for alerts, not idle conversation. The environment influences the difficulty of tasks. Cold mornings stiffen joints and muscles, requiring slow movements to prevent strain. Rain makes the ground slippery and unpredictable, turning simple chores into careful balancing acts. Heat from midday sun can sap energy, forcing people to slow their pace. The body must constantly adjust to survive. People work together, but collaboration is practical, not social. Sharing labor reduces effort and prevents accidents. Group tasks are coordinated quietly with minimal discussion. Everyone knows their role, and deviation is rare. Cooperation is functional, not friendly. The workday is structured by necessity rather than desire. Each task has a purpose: to prepare food, to maintain shelter, to care for animals, to preserve resources. Every movement contributes to survival. There is no luxury of idle curiosity or exploration. Efficiency and persistence govern all activity. Fatigue accumulates steadily.
Even a small task feels heavier as the day progresses. The body does not fully recover from night to morning, so effort compounds. The mind notices this, but does not resist. It adjusts. Pain, stiffness, and tiredness are acknowledged, but tolerated. Lunch, if it occurs, is brief. It is not a reward, but a pause. Food provides enough energy to continue working. Nothing more. People do not rest excessively. Every hour spent idle is an hour lost for preparation, maintenance, or survival. As afternoon arrives, work continues under the same rules. Simple tasks become repetitive, yet necessary. Even small improvements or corrections consume energy, but cannot be ignored. The day does not offer forgiveness for shortcuts or mistakes. Children observe adults carefully. They imitate movements, learn sequences, and adjust to rhythms of labor. Observation is a form of education, more effective than instruction alone. Learning comes from participation, and mistakes are absorbed quietly into understanding. As dusk approaches, work shifts slightly. Tasks transition toward preparing for night. Firewood is collected, water stored, animals secured. Shelter is checked and repaired where needed. Tools are cleaned and organized for tomorrow. These final actions ensure the next day begins with some stability. Evening does not bring rest automatically. The body is tired, but preparation continues. Meals are cooked, clothing is adjusted, spaces for sleeping are arranged. Each action is deliberate, requiring minimal energy while maximizing function. Efficiency remains the priority. By the time night fully arrives again, the body is worn but capable. Work has stretched the limits of endurance without breaking it. Pain exists quietly beneath each movement, tolerated as part of life. Fatigue is constant but manageable. This relentless cycle teaches resilience. People adapt to work that never pauses, learning to conserve energy, manage effort, and accept discomfort without complaint. Sleep is a temporary relief, but the rhythm of labor never truly stops. Work defines life in medieval times more than leisure, comfort, or pleasure. Survival depends on consistent, measured effort repeated daily. Each task, no matter how small, contributes to maintaining the household, the body, and the community. By nightfall, when the fire is lit again and the cold begins to creep in, the body is ready to rest, but only briefly. Tomorrow brings more work, more challenges, and the same relentless rhythm. You accept it because resistance wastes energy, and energy is survival. The cycle continues. Work, meals, preparation, rest, and then work again. There is no pause for indulgence, no room for luxury. Every hour is accounted for, every movement deliberate, every task essential. Endurance, not strength, determines success. Efficiency, not comfort, guides choices. Work never stops, and neither can you. By the time sleep returns, your body is heavy and worn, but capable. And tomorrow, the cycle begins again, exactly as it did today.
By the time evening approaches, the day has already left its mark on the body. Muscles are stiff, joints ache, and fatigue sits like a shadow that refuses to leave. Night brings no relief. Instead, it introduces a new challenge, cold that seeps into every part of life. In medieval times, warmth was never guaranteed, and the chill became a constant companion for those who survived from sunset to sunrise. You notice it first in small ways. Fingers feel less responsive than they should. Toes, tucked in layered clothing, are still cold, as if the warmth never reached them at all. Even when the fire burns, its reach is limited. Heat exists in patches, touching hands, face, or shoulders, but it never fully fills the space you occupy. Cold is patient. It does not hurry. It does not announce itself dramatically. Instead, it presses steadily, testing endurance slowly. You adjust your clothing, pull blankets tighter, and curl slightly, attempting to trap what little warmth you have. The body responds as best it can, but it is never fully satisfied. Walls and roofs offer little protection. Structures are simple and functional. Wood, thatch, and small stones keep rain out but do not insulate efficiently. Wind slips through cracks unnoticed during the day, but at night it feels sharper, creeping into spaces where heat is weakest. You learn to move carefully, keeping the cold at bay with positioning and layering rather than relying on the building itself. Fire is your ally, but it is also limited. Maintaining it requires effort. Too much fuel wasted, and there may be none for later hours. Too little, and the cold grows stronger. People balance heat carefully, checking embers, adjusting wood, coaxing flames to life. The warmth is never constant. It flickers, rises, fades, and moves unpredictably. The sensation of cold affects everything. Limbs stiffen more quickly, movements slow, and muscles ache as they work harder to produce warmth internally. You notice small changes. Hands feel clumsier, steps quieter, breathing slightly shallow. The body prioritizes heat over efficiency, forcing adjustment in subtle ways. Even sleep cannot fully protect you. Nights are shallow. You toss, turn, and shift repeatedly, searching for positions that can serve warmth. Blankets are rearranged, clothing adjusted, arms and legs tucked in close. Each movement provides only temporary relief before the cold finds a new point of attack. People learned to survive it by layering clothing. Wool, linen, and whatever scraps were available became essential. Layers were bulky, sometimes stiff, and never completely comfortable, but they created barriers that slowed the spread of cold. Every layer mattered. Every piece had a purpose. The body also developed endurance over time. Fingers that once went numb now take longer to feel the first sharp ache. Toes that used to tingle with cold gradually adapt. The mind accepts the discomfort, treating it as another constant rather than a threat. Survival teaches patience with the chill. Even small tasks are complicated by cold. Fetching water, stirring food, or tending fires feels heavier during the day. Movements require more thought, energy is scarce, and cold drains it faster than work alone. Every action is deliberate, conserving effort while maximizing outcome. You notice the quiet persistence of the night. No one rushes, no one panics. Everyone accepts that the cold will be there until it is gone, and it will only be gone when warmth becomes unavoidable. Fire, movement, and layering are temporary shields against it, not solutions. In shared spaces, cold is also social. People huddle close together, conserving heat collectively. Children sleep near adults, not just for comfort, but for warmth. Small adjustments in position, blankets, and clothing become coordinated without discussion. Bodies align in ways that optimize shared survival. Stillness is a challenge. Remaining motionless for long periods allows heat to escape. Even while attempting to sleep, small involuntary movements occur. Hands curl slightly, feet shift, shoulders roll. Each action is instinctive, an attempt to stave off the slow creep of chill. The mind notices all of this. You cannot ignore it entirely. The cold is present in the background, pressing lightly but consistently on awareness. It shapes thoughts, attention, and even dreaming. Sleep is lighter. Dreams are interrupted by sensation. Rest exists, but only in small pockets. Some nights are harsher than others. Winds from distant fields, changes in temperature, or failing fires intensify the challenge. People adapt, moving closer to heat, rearranging bedding, or sharing warmth. Patterns form naturally as the body and mind learn the limits of endurance. Morning brings little relief. Even with daylight, the cold lingers in shadows, in floors, in walls that did not warm fully during the day. The body carries night's chill into work, stretching muscles more carefully, moving slower, conserving energy. The cycle begins again, teaching that survival is not about comfort, but about persistence. The cold, like all challenges of medieval nights, is steady and impartial. It does not discriminate. Everyone feels it, and everyone must adjust. The lesson it teaches is subtle: patience, adaptation, and respect for limits.
Survival depends not on avoiding discomfort, but on learning to endure it efficiently. By night's end, when fire burns low again, bodies are heavy with fatigue, fingers and toes chilled, and muscles stiff. The cold has tested them, but they remain intact. Tomorrow promises repetition, but for now there is rest, however temporary. Cold does not kill instantly. It teaches slowly, persistently, shaping routines and behaviors. People endure, adapt, and continue. Each night survived adds knowledge and resilience. Even in discomfort, survival is possible. You feel the night around you, cold pressing in, and understand that this is a challenge that repeats endlessly. It is not comfortable, it is not pleasant, but it is survivable, and in medieval times, that was all that mattered. The night is long, the cold is patient, and your body learns, slowly but surely, how to endure it.